The small village, once surrounded by lush green fields and towering ancient trees, was now nothing more than a barren land under the scorching sun of a devastating drought. The winding rivers that had once been the village's lifeline were now cracked trenches of dry earth. Ponds lay empty, and even the deepest wells had run dry. Under the sparse shade of the 1,000-year-old banyan tree beside the communal house, hundreds of villagers gathered to discuss how to survive. Every face was gaunt, their eyes revealing fear and despair as thirst tormented them hour by hour. Amid the heavy atmosphere, thick with anxiety, Lucius stepped forward with the bearing of a savior. He wore a simple yet striking white garment, always full of energy and eager to share his ideas. Lucius believed that because he was intelligent and well-informed, everyone was obligated to listen to him. He climbed onto the highest step of the communal house, clapped loudly to draw attention, and boldly declared, "People of the village, do not waste time in fear. I have heard that on the northern mountain peak, there are underground springs that have never run dry. We must set out immediately. Action and determination are what will save us now, not sitting still and waiting to die." Lucius's firm assertion surged through the desperate crowd like electricity. He described the cool mountain streams with astonishing conviction, even though he had never set foot there and had only heard about them from others. The villagers began to murmur, many nodding in approval. They were persuaded by Lucius's strong voice and decisive manner, believing he must certainly be right. Cries of "Follow Lucius" began to rise, overpowering even the dry wind. In a shaded corner beneath the banyan tree, Silas quietly observed in his simple gray clothing. He was a quiet, thoughtful man who preferred listening and learning to showing off. Silas noticed something troubling. Lucius had become so absorbed in his confidence that he had forgotten to consult those with experience. He saw that Lucius completely ignored Elder Eldrick, the elder who had lived through many droughts, and paid no attention to the group of messengers who had just returned from distant journeys. Silas stepped closer and gently said, "Wait, Lucius. Should we not listen to those who have just returned or seek Elder Eldrick's counsel before embarking on such a distant journey?" The crowd immediately fell silent, but it was an uncomfortable silence. They looked at Silas coldly. What would Silas know? He's always silent. We need action, not hesitation. Lucius let out a mocking laugh. "Silas, you're always silent, so you never have any ideas. What do you know about the world outside? Trust my judgment." The crowd cheered excitedly. They hurried away to prepare their belongings, placing their full trust in the promise of water on the high mountain. Act 1 ends with Lucius leading the procession northward, with a self-satisfied gaze, leaving Silas and a few clear-minded villagers standing silently behind, watching with heavy concern. Early the next morning, before the first rays of sunlight could further dry the cracked earth, Lucius stood at the head of the village, calling everyone to set out. Most of the young men and the strongest villagers had been completely persuaded. They carried their last remaining food and left with unwavering faith. Silas stood at the village gate, quietly watching as the group gradually disappeared into the dusty haze. While Lucius was absorbed in the distant journey, Silas began seeking the truth right where he lived by listening to those who had been overlooked. He went to Elder Eldrick's small house and bowed his head, asking, "Sir, is there a way out that we have missed because we were too hasty?" Elder Eldrick smiled kindly. "My son, the secret often lies in the quietest places. Near the western caves, there is an ancient underground spring. It has never run dry because it runs deep into the earth. But people are too busy talking about distant things that no one remembers the old stories anymore." Silas continued by seeking out the group of messengers who had just returned. He listened as they spoke of a small lake hidden behind the tall grass fields in the west. Silas shared this information with those who remained in the village. Together they went to that place, and indeed, amid the tall grass there was still a clear lake. Without a dangerous journey, the village found salvation right in its own homeland.
Keep moving.
Meanwhile, Lucius's group was living through a nightmare.
Lucius.
The journey up the mountain was longer and harsher than they had imagined. When they finally reached the summit, they found only dry rock crevices. Lucius stood silently among the scorching cliffs, shame rising within him as he looked at those who had trusted him, now utterly exhausted. Mind when he saw those who had trusted him collapsing from exhaustion and disappointment.
Keep
3 days
moving.
later, the
The
weary
gate is
group
just
returned
ahead.
to the village. Their clothes were torn, their lips cracked from thirst. Before their eyes was a completely opposite scene. The villagers were cheerfully carrying clear water from the lake that Silas had found. Lucius stood frozen as Silas stepped forward and handed him a bowl of cool water. There were no words of reproach. Lucius choked with emotion. "I'm sorry. I thought I was wise because I spoke so much, but it turns out I was a fool for not knowing how to listen. My pride put everyone in danger." Silas placed a hand on his shoulder. "Anyone can make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." From that day on, Lucius changed. He was still full of ideas, but he always listened before speaking. Many years later, Lucius and Silas became a model pair of leaders for the village. Lucius's enthusiasm combined with Silas's thoughtfulness kept the village prosperous. They taught the younger generation, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason to listen twice as much as we speak." The story reminds us that a mouth that knows how to remain silent will gather understanding. An open heart will receive knowledge from everywhere.